Good morning. This is Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble, and I'm excited today. I have a great guest with me that I know you're going to enjoy. Alejandro Rivas-Micoud is with me, and Alejandro is the founder and CEO of Userlytics. And we're going to learn some interesting things not only about Alejandro, but his company as well today. Welcome, Alejandro.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm really interested to know what sparked you to start your company.
Well, many founders, when asked that question, will go back to a kind of founding mythology story. Like I was in a bar and I was having a drink, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had glasses so we could drink this stuff instead of directly from the bottle? Um, but I suspect that most of those founding mythologies are not true. In any case, they were certainly not true for us. We didn't have any of those kinds of stories. This is, I think, probably the sixth firm I founded. Other firms that I founded have been sometimes successful, sometimes learning experiences. I started what was intended to be a completely different firm, social media firm, actually. Um, we launched, we had a team in Europe, we had a team in the US. It became clear to me after the launch that it was either going to be a failure or it was going to take a lot more money than I was willing to put in. So I got everybody together, the team, and I explained the situation transparently. And I asked them, do you guys have any ideas of what we should do for a living? And, you know, I, I wasn't really expecting anything to come out of that, but I just thought it was the fair question to ask at that juncture. And one of the members came up with, hey, why don't we do usability testing, which was an area that I was not at all familiar with at the time, but which immediately caught my interest. And I started to, dive into it and learn about user experience and why it's so important. And I remembered from my previous startups how important those kind of things were, although I hadn't really understood that, hey, you can do something about it. You can, really focus as a discipline in improving the user experience, and that will have huge benefits. So, anyway, we did a proof of concept. It went well, and we dove right in.
It's a great story. Was there a moment that you said to yourself, "This is it. I know this is the path."
Yes, but it occurred many years after the beginning. I mean, I like to think that most startups go through three phases, one of which is, the excitement, the joy, we're getting started, fantastic. And then a phase that I like to call the journey through the valley of the shadow of death, which is a lot harder. And in our case, occupied a number of years. And then all of a sudden, everything clicked. We had found our ICP, our ideal customer profile. The market also had caught up with us because I have to say that when we launched, it was premature at that time to scale. And as you know, Silicon Valley, there's a cardinal sin, premature scaling. And despite knowing all about that, I,
Did
probably
it anyway.
sinned in that regard. But anyway, the market caught up with us, and all of a sudden exploded in demand, really. And so that was the moment, and that was probably around the year 2015, 2016, more or less around that time
Yeah.
period.
How exciting. I think we've all been in that valley a time or two. I'm interested to know about your leadership style. And I know my viewers are going to be interested to hear with your background, not only about your leadership style, but what happened that molded it. Did you have role models that did it? Is it something you acquired along the journey? But tell us a little bit, please, about your leadership style.
Yeah, great question. I guess in the origins of my career, I was working as a nuclear engineer, and uh, the nuclear power industry, their clients are utilities. The utilities are natural monopolies. So there's a lot of waste that goes on in those environments. There's some people that are working very hard, and some people who are hardly doing any work at all, and both get paid the same. Um, my choice was to work very hard, and that's what I did. And I was really 12-hour days, just at it very hard. Um, and I had a team of people working with me, but it was the first time I was actually managing a team, and I didn't really understand how it wasn't all about me doing the work. It was about managing the team and making
Yes.
sure they did the work. Now, I then did an MBA, and then I went to Japan. And in Japan, did a small startup, and the first or one of the first employees I hired was actually my younger brother. And at a certain, brothers, they don't hold back when they criticize their siblings.
Right.
There's no reason to, right? And so he did not. And he told me, and he had had leadership experience in the US Army. And he said, "You're throwing me out there with no training, nothing, and just expecting me, to sink or swim." And it really hit me because he was so right. It was true. Um, so that's when I became aware there was an issue in my leadership style. I didn't quite solve it at that point, but I realized there was an issue. Being in Japan was very helpful because the Japanese culture is one of collaboration and of consensus and consensual decision making. And so I really learned from the culture, and from the employees. And I started to apply that when I went back to Europe and started two telecom firms, one of which grew to a substantial size, about 450 people. Um, and I applied a lot of what I learned in Japan in terms of building a great culture. That became for me more important than building systems and processes and things like that. Which, by the way, goes well with my personality because I'm not a great systems guy. That's just me. I have to hire people who are good at that because I'm not. But I did build a great culture, and I'm very proud of the fact that years later, when I met ex-employees of those telecom firms, they told me the best moment in my professional life was that moment in my life, and I felt great about that. And we were, ultimately successful, though we navigated very turbulent times. Um, and I've applied that ever since. You know, I believe in the adage, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I really believe in that.
Love that. You gave us two lessons there already. One is that to be successful, we need the support of others, and to remember that when we're leading, that people come first. We can have the best of everything, and if we're not taking care of our people, we can create a big issue for our company and how fast we can either scale or grow or be successful. It's really great. I'm interested. Did you have mentors? Were there like mentors in your early career that helped move you forward? And it seems like you've done a lot of companies and learned a lot. I'm curious, was there something earlier in life that got you kicked off on this dedication to sounds like grab things that work very hard and make them successful and run with them?
I can't, well, later in life, I did go to a leadership course with a favorite professor of mine by the name of Manfred Ketevrie, and he's a well-known author, and he has a theory that corporations are kind of like people. So, you can have the paranoid organization, or you can have the manic organization, or you can have the depressive organization, and so on and so forth. And he analyzes, He's actually a practicing psychotherapist, so he knows of what he talks, but he applies that to the corporate realm. And anyway, he uh, brought me into a leadership course that was about a month long with senior executives from around the world, and that was a very intense uh, immersion in the kinds of people first, as you say, um, uh, management techniques. One thing he mentioned to me that I've never forgotten is he said, all my alumni, all my students, or most of them, when they wake up in the morning, if they say the wrong thing, they can make 10,000 people miserable. And so my job is to help them not do that. So
Yes.
that was his mission in life. And I really liked that way of thinking about the world. But anyway, going back to the origin of your question, uh, I started trying to create businesses at a very early age. When I was 14 and living in Spain, I tried to create a home grocery delivery business. This is before,
Ah,
mobile phones and
you're
apps
ahead of your
and all that
time.
kind of stuff. Yeah, that's the problem. I had to wait 20 or 30 years for the market to catch up, which, by the way, brings me to something that I think is super important, which is timing is extremely important. And you can be too early as well as being too late. So, for example, when Apple invented the Newton in the late 90s, that was essentially an iPad. But the technologies that would enable the iPad to be a success did not exist yet.
Yes.
LCD screens and mobile data networks that were, robust, etc. So you can be too early as well as being too late. Getting it right is somewhat a matter of luck as well as, trying to get it
Yeah.
right.
I like your comments. I know in my work, I find often that leaders, especially at the CEO level, sometimes don't understand that how they operate, the way they are being dictates what goes on in their organization. I have a favorite story where I had a CEO come to me and said, Tom, I need to do one of your 2-day intensives. Let's go away for 2 days. And so I asked him, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And he goes, nobody will come see me in my office. I have this policy that anybody can come in the door and nobody ever comes. And I know there's something wrong with me. And so after a few conversations, I looked at him and said, I don't think you need a 2-day intensive. He goes, what do you think I need? I said, I think you need to come out of your office. So I don't know that I did myself any good on that one, but it woke things up. I'm interested to know, Alejandro, what did the early days of your company teach you about trust?
Hmm, that's an interesting one. Um, you know, there are always trade-offs in everything one does. And so the downside to focusing a lot on building up the corporate culture and on empowering individuals and on creating an environment where people enjoy working. There is a downside, which is um, you may be trusting people that do not merit that trust.
Mm,
And so that's going to happen. It's inevitable. So the question to do, in my view, in that sense, is to try to recognize when that happens, try to remediate it, but only for so long, because at the end of the day, it just means there's a bad fit. And it's
yes,
probably better for that person to move on to a different organization, and certainly better for the organization for him or her to move on.
yes. Thank you. Um, I'm interested to know how you keep your team culture in place when things move really fast. Our businesses have these periods, some of them all the time, that are moving really fast, and it's hard to focus on team culture. I'm interested what you do.
Yeah, well, I think that people, of course, they will pay attention to what the CEO says, but they'll pay more attention to what the CEO does. I think that's fundamental. I think, secondly, the people you hire is fundamental to how the culture will develop. So I interview every single the company, even if it's an intern, even if it's a contractor that's only going to be working on a freelance basis for 3 to 6 months. I interview every single person and I try to make sure, is this person the right cultural fit? Um, because after a while, it's not you creating a culture, it's all of you together. It's
Yes.
everybody together creating a culture. So these are the kinds of things I try to focus on, but I think it's very important. So I pay a lot of attention to it.
Love that. I'm all about risk and resilience. So I have to ask you, what was one of your riskiest decisions and how did it pay off?
Hmm. So many. Um, do you mean in terms of my current company, in terms of previous companies, or even just in terms of life in general? I mean,
I'm going to take life in general. I like that.
okay. I'd say the there were two. One was when I was 18, I had a disagreement with my parents, and I decided to do something that I had always thought of as a very romantic kind of thing, which, run away from home, basically. And I was living in Spain at the time, and although I had been born in the US, I hadn't been in the US for 11 years. And so I decided to just fly to the US on my own, very few friends or acquaintances, and only I think I had $40 in my pocket or something like that. So I think that was way up there in terms of the risk amount that I was willing to tolerate. Um, a second one was after I graduated from business school. I had a lot of opportunities to go work for an investment bank, go work for a strategic consultancy firm, go work for a major corporation in Europe, in the US. But at the time, I was fascinated with Japan, and I decided to go to Japan, a country where I did not know the language. I obviously had zero of a network, and established myself there. So both of those things, it's arguable whether it was risky or just plain stupid. But
You're still here.
I I'm still here. That may be more a question of luck than anything else. But uh, in terms of Japan, indirectly, it did contribute to where I am today. But through many, it was a long journey. But no regrets there. It was a great experience, and likewise in the U.S., it was very tough the first, especially the first 4 years.
Yes.
But after that, it became very good, and yeah.
Yeah,
Just
thank you. Thank you. At Userlytics, I am interested to know how you define success beyond metrics.
okay. If we're not talking about metrics, then I would say that the best indication of success is to receive accolades from happy customers in relation to specific members of the staff, which we've
Yeah.
received where such and such did such a fantastic job. They went above and beyond the line. They were wonderful. Isn't that? When we receive that, that's clearly we're doing something right. Both because the employee did that and because the client experienced that and was happy with that. So it talks to both success in terms of the market, the client, but also success in terms of what the employees are doing and thinking. So that would be one that would certainly be way up there.
Yes, your focus and dedication I hear to your people speaks directly to my heart. I'm a big advocate of how we take care of our people, promote them, and I don't mean just in title, but how we recognize them, and wonderful when customers help us do that. I'm interested.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm interested in knowing how you navigate pushback, from within the organization when there's pushback. What do you do with that?
Great question because um, I think CEOs are always by nature in danger of not receiving sufficient pushback. And so it's very important to either hire people who have the personality willing to push back against the desire, the latest crazy idea from the CEO,
Yes.
uh, or that they're trained to do so. And by trained, I mean when pushback occurs, don't shoot the messenger, um, and be willing to admit publicly, oops, I was wrong. You're
Yes.
right. So I'm a very argumentative person. I will defend my point of view. I'm a, opinionated like many people, but I have, and I'm proud of the fact that I have been in an argument, even a heated argument with a group of people, and all of a sudden, you're right, and I'm wrong. And that's the right thing to do
Yes.
because we all need somebody to see our blind spots. And the group decision, this is something I learned in Japan, the group's decision is always better than the most intelligent or the most experienced or the most knowledgeable person in the room.
Yeah, being willing to do that makes us human. It takes the title away and allows us to be seen as someone on the team, not just someone in the corner office, so to speak. I really like your approach there. What's the boldest vision for Userlytics in the next 5 years?
Well, we face, like every industry right now, an incredible amount of uncertainty.
Mm.
Not just geopolitical and macroeconomic, but AI is the biggest event in my lifetime, and I would argue in anyone's lifetime. And we are grasping onto the opportunities that we see as quickly as we can and trying to leverage AI in multiple ways, both to enhance our service offerings to our clients, but also to improve our processes. But at the same time, we cannot be blind to the fact that there will also be challenges emerging from AI, and it's impossible really to forecast what they will be. So the only thing we can do is just try to be as agile as possible in dealing with those challenges as they emerge. And it's going to be a very interesting
It
next
is.
5 years, that's for sure.
Yeah, one thing we know, AI is here. And when I look at it, while I agree with you, it is huge. I also see what I've seen over the course of my career in these new technologies where we have so many people working on it that eventually some will fail, some will get gobbled up, and we'll have some clear leaders in the AI space. But what an exciting ride getting there for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting, what comes to mind to me is Bill Gates' observation that people overestimate the impact of new technologies in the short term and underestimate them in the long term. And so I'm keen to see how that plays out in the world of AI. But I'm
Yeah,
sure, I think that saying of his is quite true.
yeah, yeah. I love to embrace these shifts in technology. I think they drive shifts not only in technology, they drive shifts in our culture, what our purpose is, constantly keeping us in the need to realign. I'm interested to know when things get tough, what keeps you inspired?
Yeah. So I'll tell you an anecdote of one story, which was early 2000s. The dot-com boom had just turned into the dot-com bust. And all of a sudden, my parent company, US NASDAQ firm, had the majority of the shares in my European company. We were a telecom operator. We had been approached by some of the major investment banks about doing an IPO valuing our European subsidiary at $1.6 billion dollars. So I was very excited. I was a significant shareholder. Um, and then the bust happened. And long story short, our parent company went bankrupt. And when it went bankrupt, our company, the subsidiary, um, it had a huge debt, a huge cash burn. We were in a market that was no longer the flavor of the month, quite the contrary. And our parent company, who had been our source of financing, was gone. And so, obviously, in my mind, the value of the company just went down to zero. And so, in that moment, I decided to look at it in the following way, which is over the previous 12 months, the theoretical value of my company had been going down. So that'd been a very stressful thing to experience. But now it was zero. And so my way of thinking about it was there's only upside from here on out. It can only go up. And so I transmitted that message to the employees. I told them, hey, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and so on and so forth. And somehow we actually had a cultural transformation, and we became, like we felt proud of the fact every month that we survived, we felt proud that we had survived against all odds. And we kept on surviving and ultimately exited at quite a nice amount, although nowhere near the original IPO listed amount, but still a very decent exit. And so that moment of extreme disaster, peril, call it what you will, I like the fact that I took the optimistic, I'm not going to say glass is half full because the glass was empty, but
Yes.
but at least I can say, okay, well, the glass can only fill from here on out. It can't get
Yeah, the
emptier.
glass got
So,
smaller, right? The glass got smaller.
but yeah.
Great. I'm interested to know what in the world right now are you most hopeful about?
Hmm. Well, if you look at the world from the optic of a developed country like the US, you see extreme polarization, you see extreme inequality in wealth, you see infrastructure crackling, and you see a number of different issues there, right? But if you look at the world from the optic of the world, we have advanced and made incredible strides in my lifetime. When I was born, most of the world lived in extreme poverty. And during that time, hundreds, even thousands of millions have been lifted out of extreme poverty into, many of them, hundreds of millions, into the middle class and into, yes, abundance. So a lot of things are going right. A lot of things are going wrong. Climate change is one of them, but a lot of things are also going right. And as I'm an optimist by nature, I think that humanity will figure out a way out of its problems and challenges. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question,
It
but
does, it does, it
my
does.
best stab at it.
Yeah, we seem to keep going on, right? We do, and somehow improving as we go along, even though it's tough. That's sort of what resilience is about. I am curious if your younger self were watching this episode, what would you say to them?
What would I say to them, or what would they say to me?
What would you say to them? What would you say to your younger
Uh,
self?
Okay. Um, hmm. I guess I would I would try to temper some of the risk-taking aspects of my personality. Everybody lives in a spectrum where some of them are more risk takers and some of them are more
Yes.
risk avoiders. You can't avoid who you are. You are who you are. But I would just try to say, try to control it a little bit. You're
Yeah.
always going to be a risk taker, but just try to not to do it. Try not to be too crazy.
Yeah, try
Basically.
pick your risks wisely, I guess. Yeah. I have one question for you that I think my viewers are going to love because this has been really engaging. And I'm curious about what piece of wisdom you would share with an emerging leader, an emerging founder. Um, what would you want them to hear from you?
Well, probably nothing that they haven't heard from reams of management books and articles, etc. But I would say that again, corporate culture trumps everything else. I would say when you look at how much time you spend in your work, try to divide it up into, okay, I spend this much on business development, this much finance, operations, whatever it is. Try to make sure the amount of time you spend on just HR related things, interviewing people, chatting with, like you said, going out of the office, chatting with key employees and not so key employees, just chatting with different employees and finding out, chatting with clients, just talking to people. Um, I think is whether they're clients or employees is hugely productive for a CEO, and perhaps more so than spending a lot of time in the Excel dungeons figuring out models and
Yes.
processes and things like that. So that would be one piece of advice, I guess. I I have to say this because I am in this industry and I do believe it, but I would also say, because I like to say, user experience eats strategy for breakfast. And obviously, I'm stealing from Peter Drucker when I say that, but I do believe it. So focus on the user experience. If you're going to focus on anything at all, more so than marketing, more so than sales, more so than finance, focus on the user experience. If you get that right, your chances of success are going to be hugely
Yes.
more higher.
Yes. Listen up, viewers, to these two pieces of wisdom from Alejandro. If you listen closely, you're going to hear both of them are related to people, which is really important and I think profound. Alejandro Rivas-Micoud, I am grateful to have you on Opening Pathways today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so
And
much for having me and to your
yes, it was
listeners.
great. Very, very engaging. I enjoyed it. Viewers, thank you for joining us today on Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble, and I will see you next time.